For what is perhaps one of the most beloved games in the franchise, Fire Emblem Blazing Sword seems to get a lot of hate these days for a plethora of reasons. People love to criticize the avalanche of plot holes in its story, its fairly simplistic gameplay, and its inconsistent levels of difficulty and map design. But by far one of the largest criticisms of the game tends to be aimed at the opening tutorial segment of the game, Lyn Mode. I recently played through and completed Lyn Mode in a single stream with my friends SpeedyHawk and JAIK, which, by the way, you can catch us every Sunday at 3 PM EST on SpeedyHawk's channel if you want to see us each commanding a small group of units and sabotaging each other in a turn-based format. Link below to the details of episode 1. I actually highly recommend you check it out. But during this stream, I got a revelation, and I think I'd be lying if I said that any of us actually really felt that this mode was lackluster or unenjoyable, and this got me thinking, does Lyn Mode really deserve all the hate that it gets? The answer to that is, absolutely not, and most of this criticism is quite unfair actually, so let's dive into why that is. In order to understand the functionality of Lyn Mode, we need to take a trip down memory lane and to the roots and history of Fire Emblem. Fire Emblem Blazing Sword was the 7th installation in the Fire Emblem series, but this game was unique in that it was the first game to be released outside of Japan back in 2003. After the massive success of Super Smash Bros. Melee and the popularity of Marth and Roy, this brought a lot of new players into the community who were starting their Fire Emblem journeys with this game. Add that to the massive success and library of the Game Boy Advance at the time, with the relatively affordable price of games in the US being around $30, this set up Fire Emblem 7 to be a relatively accessible title to younger audiences as well. And if you've seen my last video, then you know that this is exactly what happened to me, and it's my origin story introduction to Fire Emblem 2. Now that we know the backstory of this, and you'll see why this is important very soon, I'm going to dive into one of Lyn Mode's major complaints: the forced tutorials. I'm going to try and look at this as objectively as possible, instead of through the lens of my younger self from back in the day, but I'd assume that for the majority of people picking up a totally new type of game, you're going to want to learn how the game works when you initially start it. Lyn Mode is an 11-chapter mini-segment at the start of the game, and it is absolutely flooded with forced tutorials and forced movement, and while this eases off the further you progress into the mode, it lasts right up until the second to last chapter in this portion of the story. These can be incredibly frustrating to a veteran player who knows what they're doing, and even to someone who has no idea about the inner workings of Fire Emblem or strategy RPGs in general. But it's also incredibly useful. I'm actually one of the biggest supporters of this style of tutorial because almost every forced tutorial in Lyn Mode seeks to serve a very important purpose of teaching a player about an invaluable mechanic that they will take forward with them in the much longer journey that is to come with this game. Also, back then we didn't have casual mode, so the margins for trial and error with permadeath in play were much smaller. These new players needed to learn about the game mechanics quickly and clearly in order to avoid deterring them from putting down the series and just never coming back due to feeling that it would waste their time. Having said that, it's very easy to just say this without showing you what I mean, so I'll break this down briefly chapter by chapter. In the prologue, you learn how to move your character, use items, interact with enemies, and even critical hits and level ups. In chapter 1, you learn about the weapon triangle and trading. In Chapter 2, you learn about terrain, its bonuses and hindrances, as well as breakable walls. It also teaches you about the Seize the Throne function to end chapters, which is a staple mechanic moving forward. In Chapter 3, you learn about visiting houses for recruitment and items, and unit weapon weaknesses and advantages, as well as attacking from range. In Chapter 4, you learn about how to recruit enemy units and recognize their motives, as well as the defense type maps. Chapter 5 brings with it an introduction to recruitable green units, as well as healing and offensive magic. Chapter 6 is all about thieves, opening doors, unlocking chests, stealing and activating switches to progress map objectives, and using stat boosters. And might I just add, Wrath's introduction has to be one of the most badass unit introductions in the entire series. Chapter 7 introduces the ever-important dance function, as well as light and dark magic to clarify the magical weapon triangle. You'll also learn about Gaiden chapters here as well, but it serves as a pivotal story point in the game, which I'll talk about later on. I don't know what the hell the point of Chapter 7X is, nor do I recall if there are any forced tutorials here, but you get a little story Easter egg, I guess. Chapter 8 introduces long-range weaponry in the form of a ballista, but it also introduces a rather underutilized mechanic in the series via weapon triangle reversal weapons, or reavers. Chapter 9 brings with it the very popular and beloved Fog of War mechanic, but in addition to that, it teaches you about unit promotion, which is incredibly important. And last but not least is Chapter 10. Now, this chapter more or less gives you free reign over what you want to do, but as much as I wish it didn't have anything to teach you, it does. Here you get to learn about rain, and I guess by extension, snow. This absolutely pointless mechanic just slows down the movement of everyone on the map and doesn't really appear much down the line in the series at all, but it exists nonetheless and is another teaching point. As you can see, almost every single chapter in Lyn Mode is mechanically important and pivotal to teaching the player something about the series that they didn't know before. And while you may disagree, as a mode that is an entry-level mode for a lot of incoming new players, I think it's very important to handle it thoroughly. People learn by doing, and if you show them what to do and how to do it, then they will more easily be able to execute that on their own down the line. I know you could say this is hand-holding, but sometimes a kid needs to have their hand held. The only criticism I can really think of is that if you're purchasing a new game cartridge, you only have the choice of starting on Lyn normal mode, and that's annoying if you're a returning player to the series. The hard mode option actually removes all the tutorials and gives you complete free reign from the very beginning, and if I were Intelligent Systems, I would have just presented that as an option to the players right out of the box. This doesn't fix the tedium of the mode, but it does make it a lot less frustrating for veterans of the series. Regardless, it's not really right to completely deny the usefulness of Lyn Mode mechanically in the historical context of the series. But I'm not done there, you see. Lyn Mode is also heavily criticized for feeling like it's not relevant to the story, and for that, I get to do my favorite thing in the world, and that's looking at characters, story, and lore. Small warning, there's slight spoilers for Lyn Mode ahead, but it's nothing earth-shattering for the context of FE7. In a nutshell, Lyn Mode is the story of a girl who is surviving on her own after the massacre of her entire tribe at the hands of bandits on the plains. The girl saves you, the tactician, and together you aid her in her journey to reclaim and discover her lineage as a noble in a different country, while fleeing from bandits, surviving assassination attempts, and attempting to maneuver through ever-difficult political scenarios and racism. But along this journey, you also meet a bunch of characters and story references who eventually make a return further down the line of the game. The most clear intersection is your collision with Eliwood, Nils, Ninian, and the Black Fang in Chapter 7 and 7X. Nils' sister Ninian has been kidnapped, and he comes to ask you for your aid in saving her. If you're also diligent with visiting houses, you can discover a rather impatient Hector waiting for his friend Eliwood, who you will eventually find at the castle, having accomplished your objective for you and saved Ninian. And if you accept the side quest to help Ninian retrieve her ring, you also get to briefly meet Ursula, who will be the source of much PTSD later. I promise. However, after these two side stories, there isn't much more to add to the overarching narrative outside of character development and world building, which you'll get quite a bit of. Lyn's Kaelin retainers are obviously a core group that surrounds her, but you also meet Dorcas, who is later found with the Foray group, Wrath, who becomes a wandering mercenary seeking to carve his own path after racial persecution, and Matthew, an Ostian spy. There are others as well, but you can see that all of these will be characters outside of Lyn's main core that you will meet within their own circumstances that tie into the world around you as you navigate the greater story of the game. It also gives you an opportunity to have a leg up on character levels, as these units will join you at the level they left you when you finish Lyn Mode, so it also serves you mechanically as well. This brings me to Lyn herself. Lyn is actually a rather deep character within the context of this game. She has her own full storyline to develop and grow on her own, and even though she eventually takes a bit of a backseat role to Eliwood and Hector throughout the remaining majority of the game, she does serve an important role to both of them that would take an entire video for me to get into depth for. I'll just say her conversation with Hector on the boat map is one of my favorite Fire Emblem character interactions of all time because of how raw and real it is. So yeah, there you go. I wrote about 4 pages about the importance of Lyn Mode to the Fire Emblem franchise. I don't know if I ever thought I'd do this, but let me know what your thoughts are below and whether you agree or disagree. Outside of that, if you're still with me and watching until the end, 1, I appreciate that, but 2, you get a little teaser. You see, I finished my first Ace Attorney game recently, so if you've been around for a while and have seen some videos on the channel, you know what that means. Anyways, stay tuned and I will see you all in the next video very soon. Peace.